So, the time is finally upon us, and Vanguard is being pushed onto all of our machines. Previously, I thought that most of us already had it, but apparently that was only the case if you launched PBE. But now, the day of reckoning has arrived. And so, anyone playing League of Legends has to install Riot's new Kernel level anti-cheat. Now, Riot is aware of all the problems and the issues that players may have with it. They've been aware from the very beginning, which is why they released a massive post that talks about everything Vanguard does and doesn't do. And as to how massive the post is, well, as you can see, it is very massive. And from the reactions I could gather from around the internet, Riot went into so much detail that all the people who know a thing or two about hacking got impressed. And that included some familiar faces from the hacking scene. However, people were still able to poke some holes in Riot's arguments. The really interesting thing on top of all of this is, though, that Riot is also hosting a hacking bounty for anyone who would be interested in breaking into Vanguard, or proving that Vanguard is stealing your personal information. So today, let's go through the massive post about Vanguard so you don't have to, and let's have a look at how much Riot is paying people for breaking into their system. At the beginning of the post, we get an introduction from Mirage of Penguins, a writer who has been an anti-cheat artisan, who is responsible for dishing out over 85 million bans. Now, Riot talked about Vanguard in some previous posts before, but this time they are ready to break it all down. And right at the beginning, they agreed that this is not the most exciting topic to talk about, because the majority of the players don't cheat, and so the players won't be excited about installing something on their computer because some players have to inflate their ego with cheats. And unfortunately, here they add that when it comes to anti-cheat, the entire topic is full of concern, confusion, and a lot of misinformation. So in the next part, we get to Cheating in League 101, where they break down how cheating in League even works. And just so everyone can understand what's happening here, I'm going to translate what we've learned here and try to explain it like you're 5 years old. So, everything that happens in League of Legends is entirely server-based, which means that when you click on anything in the game, your computer is asking Riot's server to do something, be it moving your character or shooting an ability. All of that happens on Riot's server, and your computer is only reading what's happening there. So in other words, nearly none of the code is executed from your client. Your machine is mostly responsible for all the graphical stuff. That's why you can still use custom skins and the server wouldn't care. Even though with Vanguard, custom skins may not be possible anymore. Now, in the past, this wasn't always the case. At the very beginning, some things the game did were based on the client. For example, the cooldowns of your abilities used to be on your machines, and when the cooldown went off, you told Riot server, hey, my ability can be cast now. This is why, if you go back through the history of cheating in League of Legends, you can find some funny videos of people playing League of Legends with no cooldown on flash. It's because their machine was able to bypass it. But now, all cooldowns and all the data is entirely on Riot's server. Which means that because you can't use these kinds of cheats anymore, most cheating in League of Legends is based on scripting, which is where you get a program on your computer that essentially plays the game for you with something like an aimbot. This is where you can find all the godly pixel-perfect kiting from Zeri, or the occasional untouchable Cassiopeia. Those moves are either pulled off by a pro player or a scripter. And the big issue with scripting is that once you know it exists, people can suspect any good player of using a script. And to back all of that up, Riot brought up some data. Apparently, the scripters of League never go away because cheating is addicting. And what doesn't help is that League is a free-to-play game. So with all the bans being dished out, It opened up a secondary problem, which is a black market with freshly leveled accounts. In this post, Riot claimed that as of them writing this article, the price of a fresh account is about $2. But we actually talked about this in a previous video. And for the EU and the US, the average price of a level 30 account is about $10. Regardless of the price, the entry fee into cheating is still very low. And it is low because all of these new accounts are also leveled up using scripting. So it all makes a perfect circle. After which, we get some data on how many cheaters you can actually find in League per game. As you can see, around the end of 2022, cheating skyrocketed. This could be related to the big security breach that happened, but regardless, this is why Riot pushed for big ban waves around that time. And according to the stats, in the recent months, you can find as many as one cheater in every 15 games. That is actually a lot. And what's crazy about it is that most people don't even realize it. Most people claim they have never seen a cheater in their life, me included. But according to these stats, that is highly unlikely. And if you were ever really destroyed by an enemy player, it might have been a scripter. So the next time you play, there may be a really good Vayne in your game. And it may be a really good player, while in reality, it might be just a script. Now here, they also pointed out that in some regions the cheating is a lot more frequent. Apparently the cheating is not really region-based, it's just that the cheaters move wherever it's easiest to cheat. And in those regions there may be as many as one cheater in every 5 games. Which is also why Riot likely started pushing for Vanguard. What Riot also notes here is that cheating is only ever worth to people if there is glory to be stolen. So funnily enough, if people are trying to cheat, it means you are running a successful competitive scene. After which Riot gives us a crazy number. Because most people cheat for the stolen glory, it means they do it in ranked. And apparently, when piloted optimally, their win rate is about 80%. This is massive, because normally, if you are climbing the ladder as you should, your win rate should be about 55%. What's even crazier is that if you look at the graph, over 10% of master games had a cheater in them, which was also later confirmed in the post. And even in Challenger, which is a place Riot manually checks, they still had about 5% of the games being affected by scripters. Now at the end of this part, Riot says that things would have gotten even worse, because the cheaters simply completely broke Riot's anti-cheat. Speaking of which, that's what Riot dives into next. The current anti-cheat was called Packman. Packman worked decently well for its time. But as is mentioned here, the older an anti-cheat is, the more cheaters figure it out, and the more the anti-cheat needs to change. This is a never-ending game of mouse and cat. And even here, Riot confirms that these days, figuring out how to bypass the anti-cheat was simply a training exercise. If Riot banned some accounts, the cheaters would figure out how it got detected, and so they would bypass it. And of course, since Riot had the massive security breach last year, the bypassing became even easier. This is also exactly why most gaming companies ban accounts in massive waves. It's to prevent the cheaters from figuring out what actually triggered the anti-cheat. And if you look at this graph of the initiated bans, not only can you tell that they are doing it in waves, but you can also see that the vast majority was automated. But after the breach, Riot had to step in and do a lot of manual bans. All of that is the red lines. So because the anti-cheat started showing its age, and because it was no longer able to challenge the cheaters, Riot opted into using Vanguard, which is exactly what the post dives into next. Long story short, One of the main reasons why Vanguard is an upgrade is because it is a lot faster. In a game that is not about long-term cheating, but rather a quick burst for every game, you need to catch the cheaters live as it is happening. To demonstrate, here we get a graph that shows us how many games a cheater gets through before they are caught. In Valorant, it hovers around 15 games, because, you should remember, those games are longer. And in League, it is about 40 games, which is a lot. And that's why speed is important. And after this, the post goes a lot deeper into the security environment around Vanguard, which is just as technical as it sounds. So trying to dumb it all down, League's Vanguard is based on TPM2, or Trusted Platform Module, which is included in every installation of modern Windows. It acts as a bit of a print on your hardware that gives it a unique ID. And as long as the TPM works properly, we can tell you are most likely not cheating. And of course, this gives Riot the ability to ban your machine simply based on that ID. They even mentioned in this article that TPM acts as an extremely non-fungible form of hardware ID. But here's the issue. What Riot doesn't tell you is that to the cheaters, this is kind of irrelevant. Because as far as I'm aware, the cheaters can swap their TPM modules entirely. So this kind of hardware ban is just an obstacle. It is not a solution to all of their problems. So after that, we get a bit more information on the drivers, which is the kernel level side of Vanguard. Of course, everyone should know that Riot did not invent this. This kind of anti-cheat has been part of many games you would not even expect. Pretty much every single AAA game, as well as some indie games, have it. So Riot is not doing anything new. Of course, the first thing they do here, as they should, is confirm that they do not plan to steal any of your personal information. Their main goal is to confirm that the games that are currently running have not been compromised by a cheater. This is the real reason for the kernel level anti-cheat to be active. It is to catch the cheater in the middle of the game, so the game gets cancelled. Then everyone gets refunded their rank and the cheaters can't do more harm. The thing is, even though the TPM is doing its fair share of work, Windows is easily corruptible, and so Riot has to make their own checks. Which is where the last graph comes in. Here we can see Valorant's percentage with all the cheaters. At the bottom, the line shows us how many games have a cheater in them. So in Valorant, it is about 2%. And above that, you can see how those cheaters get caught. The vast majority is hardware detection through TPM and the driver, with the other half of it being the standard detection and a little bit of manual banning. The thing is, without Vanguard, League would only have the standard detection and the manual bans. All the yellow hardware bans you can see here wouldn't be detected in League. So by pushing for it, Riot will be able to stop a lot more cheaters. And honestly, out of all the graphs, this is the only graph that really tells us that it's worth having Vanguard in League. But of course, it's only worth to a point, because up until now, we have avoided one important question. It is worth, but at what cost? Yup, at this point everyone knows that Vanguard has to be running on your machine from the very beginning in order to work, which is where Riot tries to calm people down a bit. When it comes to the topic of is Vanguard always running, Riot mentions that it loads on boot, but nothing is making calls, and there is no network connectivity until you launch a Riot game. As they say, it is literally just sitting there menacingly, waiting to see if something breaks the operating system before you launch a game. And when you launch a game, the client pings the driver to see if everything is okay. Now, when you put it like this, it sounds fine. But what is not mentioned here is that Vanguard is not just sitting there menacingly. It needs to know what's happening somehow. which means it periodically needs to ping your system to see if everything is working. And when it is not pinging, it is still running its internal clock to see when it should ping next. Now, the ping is probably not costly, and nor is the downtime. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Vanguard has to do something in the background to function, and that should be at least mentioned. But after that, the post comes to a close. Riot mentions that when Vanguard rolls out, they should see a massive decrease in cheaters, which is great because for the most part people didn't even know those cheaters existed. But the supply of new level 30 accounts should also dry up, because the hardware bans will make things difficult. But again, they don't mention the fact that cheaters have ways to bypass this. But at least with the hardware IDs, Riot can track what smurfs belong to what accounts, so they can ban all the accounts of a cheater at once. Not to mention that since they can detect a smurf account, they can push them into the rank where they belong faster. Although the best thing Riot mentions here is the fact that if they detect a cheater, they can go back through all the games where they cheated and they can give people back their LP. Which is probably the one benefit every tryhard will be happy to see. But then, after a hearty goodbye, that is really it for the post. Now, there is also an FAQ after this where they talk about a lot of the misinformation. Stuff like, is Vanguard spyware? Why is anti-cheat needed? And what if I get detected by a mistake? Actually, this one has a really funny answer. Apparently, every time someone reports a false positive, it is one of 7 scenarios. The person made it up, or they cheated on a Smurf account and their main got caught, or they shared their account with a booster who cheated, or they repeatedly queued with a booster who cheated, or their account was stolen by a rage hacker who steals as many accounts as possible to cheat on them, or they cheated in another game and Vanguard picked it up, or they installed malware that performed questionable operations. Which, to be fair, yeah, that one isn't their fault. But it still kinda is. Anyway, that is it for the post. After reading this, many people took a step back and agreed that, yes, Vanguard should work as it is intended. But those who have a bit more knowledge on this topic have noted that it's good, but at what cost? You're installing software on your machine that gives Riot the permission to check what you're doing. Now, I think most people can agree that Riot has no intentions to actually check what you're doing. I mean, what do you think Riot would do with your information? Do you think they are interested in your search history? But that still doesn't mean that should the worst scenario come, Riot doesn't have the option to peek inside. And that's the big issue. Everyone knows that Vanguard works, and it works quite well, but you are sacrificing a bit of your potential privacy. And that's while all the cheaters are still playing a game of cat and mouse. So the chances are, eventually Vanguard will not be enough. At which point, all the dancing around privacy will be for nothing. Unfortunately, my knowledge on all of this is somewhat mild, and if there is one person who knows a lot more, it is Pirate Software, who can kinda be considered an expert on this topic. Now, he went through this post on his stream and he shared a very similar view. The writers working on Vanguard are awesome. Vanguard works as it is intended, but it has to delve into some gray areas. The clip I'm going to show you is of course missing some context, but it is the best clip I could find that summarizes his 2-hour-long talk.
The rest of this, technically speaking, from a security perspective, makes absolute sense. This is absolutely the battle that they're fighting. Totally makes sense. They're kicking a lot of ass. This is their best possible solution to this, currently. I absolutely agree with that. The problem is how it's pitched to players, and the problem that I have with it is the level of access that kernel level grants. Yep. I'm just not a fan of it. Not a fan of it at all. So I think that's really where I sit on it. It's the same take that I've had the whole time, which is I don't like that. What would be the right solution? I prefer heuristic detection for this. Is it more timing inclusive? Yes. But to be real with you, free-to-play games are at a disadvantage. They're always going to be at a disadvantage, no matter what.
Now, what's kinda awesome is that this is not where it all ends. Because besides all of this, Riot also went for a ballsy move. They fired up a hacking bounty for any hackers who would like to crack Vanguard open. They launched the challenge on HackerOne, which is a website for these kinds of hacking challenges, with the main point not only being to prove that Vanguard is not stealing your personal information and stuff, but they also want to see if the hackers can break through so they can help Riot patch up some security holes. And if you have a look at what kind of money they are offering, of course, there's gonna be a lot of people who will give this a shot. At the lowest price from the Vanguard category, for $35,000, Riot asks you to execute a kernel level code or access some of Riot's data from your computer. For $75,000, Riot would like to see if you can do this by making someone else clicking on a malicious link. And for $100,000, Riot would like to see if you can do this without making anyone click anything. In other words, by sending a code through the network in Riot's client, you can inject exploits into someone else's machine without them clicking on anything. This sounds scary, but this has actually happened in some games in the past. For example, by installing an old Call of Duty game, people can literally take over your computer. Now, if you pull off any of these moves, of course, you have to tell Riot how you have done it, so that they can properly fix it, after which you can claim your prize. Now, funnily enough, besides this, Riot is also running a hacking challenge for people to hack into Hypixel Studios. Yep, that's the people Riot purchased who are working on Hytale. And it seems like Riot wants to see if their game is secure enough, so you can try and hack into those for $5,000. But besides that, there are also challenges for all of Riot's games. By simply cheating with an aimbot or wallhack or anything like that, you can get up to $7,000. And if you can reverse engineer their security, you can get up to $20,000. There are also thousands of dollars for unlocking skins for free, and that also includes unlocking battle passes for free. But funnily enough, there is also a challenge to crash Riot's servers through a game. And for that, you only get $10,000. And no, simple bugs don't count, otherwise Mordecai's remains would be millionaires. After which there are also challenges for the classic cheating through injecting exploits. This is all for anything between $5,000 and $30,000. And there are even some smaller prizes for the simplest hacks, such as getting someone else's IP. Here you can get $7,000 for it. But anyone who installed Skype in the past got hacked for free. But finally, that is it for the chonky post about Vanguard. It was chonky on purpose because Riot really wanted to get as much information as possible out there. And all things considered, that's exactly what they did. After going through it, a lot of people got some confidence in the fact that the games should be better with Vanguard. And that's even for the people who have never seen a cheater before. Because now Riot can give you back your LP if you've ever played against cheater without even knowing it. But as always, there is a catch, and the catch is that, in theory, Riot has the option to legally check your machine anytime they want. I do not believe Riot will ever have a reason to do this, not unless the FBI is after you or something. But nevertheless, the gray area that spawned from this is still there. And if anything, it brought up a lot of new questions.
The issue is that eventually it won't work anymore. They'll find other ways around it. And they'll have to have something even more intrusive, and something even more intrusive, until you're running some ridiculous... like, at that point, what are you going to do? Like, you can only play it on custom hardware for the video game? Like, you have to buy this console that specifically plays this video game? Because at that point, that's all you'd really have.